Welcome to my latest book, Brexit 2029, an enjoyable romp through a dystopian England brought on by Brexit. A tale of post-Brexit smugglers, love and betrayal in a dystopian society. This is chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Falling in Love. The first memory I have of Poseidon Bay was a bar called the Captain Bembo. It was a maze of rectangular rooms with cream matte paint on plastered walls. Ceiling fans were spinning overhead, wobbling on their black metal stalks, wafting the smell of steam perfume and cannabis about the place. All the tables were round, and couples dressed in Parisian designer clothes, bought from the docks, sat drinking strong English craft ale in pint jugs and staring into each other's eyes. The dresses were black, the suits were black, and my mood was black. Women wearing elegant figure-hugging dresses smoked from long, elegant cigarette holders, the roaches stuffed deep into the stem, and the licorice black Rizzler papers sizzling quietly. Wisps of thick cannabis smoke snaked to the ceiling. They had all crossed their elegant long legs, leaning forward on an elbow to get closer to their man. Not one of the women was under 5'9", and not one of the men under 6 feet. It was the land of the giants in well-fitting and expensive designer gear, but giants nonetheless. I surveyed my pint. I was alone, a stranger in town. I dared not stare at any of the pretty women. A glance at a man would be seen as an invitation to fight. I hated drinking beer from a glass with a handle. It reminded me of my father. Not a pleasant man. All anger and fists. He always drank his beer out of a jug. He was a genius who chose my name, claiming it came from the Germanic name Alberic, who was king of the elves in German mythology. He looked that up. I wished he had called me Alberic. The truth is, he had a crush on Audrey Hepburn after seeing her in a rerun of Breakfast at Tiffany's on television, and he wanted a daughter. That was how I got a boy's name that could be turned into a girl's with the flick of a pen. My school years were miserable, especially as my mum let my hair grow, and I was considered a bit of a pretty boy. I became a lonely boffin, and I got to be a salesman only when I was taken on by a steel mill. I sipped the cool beer. Bitter hops from Kent could not hide the inferior malt. They had added rice and sugar to the mix. That never worked, but it did not stop them from trying. I felt depressed by that. Smugglers even adulterated their own beer. I heard that you could get good craft beer in the big cities, but I doubted that. If you could, it would be the preserve of the rich. They got all the good stuff, but at a price. Normal people's pensions were held by companies that believed the casino, which was called the stock market, would provide such riches that all the problems of shortfalls would be solved in no time. We waited while the bankers paid themselves 3-figure bonuses, and the economy plummeted like a pigeon shot from the sky. I could do nothing about the financial situation in the country, so I went out to work. I was young, single, and careworn. It should have been carefree, but 2 out of 3 is the result these days. I should have been chatting to girls. I looked handsome and smart in my grey flannel trousers. I had a blue blazer on and a white open-neck shirt. Shiny shoes and black leather with laces completed the suave look. I looked sophisticated, and clearly my conversation would match my clothes. When I spoke to the gorgeous girls of Poseidon Bay, they would be impressed. They would all fall for my easy charm, my knowledge of books and of science, and my great sense of humour. I have an uncanny ability to remember every joke I have ever heard. Unfortunately, there were no lovely ladies in this rat hole, just Amazonian giants with a bottle blonde hair and eyebrows plucked within an inch of their lives, who looked into the eyes of their thug-ugly boyfriends. I hated my boss too. Why had he sent me to this God-forsaken place, this den of iniquity? I needed to go to the loo. I walked out of my oblong into another, slightly narrower and slightly longer and slightly shabbier. The clientele was slightly rougher too, but they wore white suits made from Irish linen and open-neck Britannia blue silk shirts. Each breast pocket was festooned with a red silk handkerchief, spilling out in a defiant celebration of all things Britain. Or British. It was the uniform of the successful smuggler set, Finding the toilet, which was identified by a huge green neon sign above yet another doorway, alerting me to its existence, I was surprised at how cavernous and clean the place was. You can guess the shape of the room by now, but there were floor-to-ceiling mirrors, a bank of cubicles on the far wall, and on another wall a row of huge oblong butler sinks in heavy white ceramic. Above them, gold taps protruded from under a shelf laden with fluffy white flannels, which were used for drying hands. It was like an international hotel, not a high street bar. The soap on the shelf, slotted between each pile of flannels, had a warrant from the king. He still maintained his Duchy of Cornwall estate's brand, even if most of his land had been purloined or been squatted on by the citizens of that country, or that county even. It smelled like chamomile and lavender. There was a little wicker basket for the used towels. I tossed two into the bottom of the empty basket. Clearly, I was the only one who bothered to wash his hands in this place. I made a mental note to wash my hands back at the hotel. There must be fecal matter on every surface here, I reckoned. I only trusted the beer glass because I had seen it come out of the dishwasher, although I could not vouch for the barman who touched the handle. At least the matter would be on the outside of the glass rather than on the inside. Though that might have helped a bit. To add a little bit of flavour, it needed all the help it could get. Returning to the table, there were two dockers standing next to my empty glass. They had their Union Jack hard hats in their hands and were approached by a tall woman in a black dress, followed obediently by her shorter minder or boyfriend, dressed in red, white and blue. She handed each of them a wad of plasticized £20 notes, which they openly checked for authenticity. No one trusted anyone in this place. She smiled, they nodded, and she waffled past them, leaving a trail of steam perfume behind her. They looked at each other without expression, but I could tell what they were thinking, and it did not involve the man who followed the beauty from the room. I thought how horrified she would be if she knew what their plans were. Appreciative but discreet glances from men whose partners were looking in their glasses or ashtrays led me to believe she was considered a beauty in Poseidon Bay. She left the room. It was time for action. "Which one of you drank my beer?" I asked bravely, rolling my shoulders so they could see how broad they were under my navy blazer. I wished that I had packed my leather biker's jacket and black jeans that I normally wore to look hard in places like this. I breathed in so my grey flannel trousers actually looked like they fitted me. A paunch is never very threatening. "Not us, Gav. We wouldn't drink beer, fam. Large debt charge, that's our tipple. Isn't that right, Roy?" the tallest said, smiling at me. He was big and broad like a bear, obviously from London. His partner was short and squat and smiled at me only once his friend had. He wore a very beery moustache with a froth on it, smelt of my pint. I was sure, but I let it go. It was not good odds. These guys looked like they used to work at Smithfield Market. I had been to the gym yesterday, but that had been the first time in 3 months. They were shifting smuggled goods on a daily basis. Barrels of cognac, boxes of perfume bottles, which they unloaded by hand. The forklift trucks used too much electricity to be utilised. The tidal boom power station, which was being built for this part of the English coast, was 3 years behind schedule as well as 3 times over budget. The power cuts would have brought all the smuggling activities to a halt if it weren't for grafters like these. They would get their tips, what they called bunts, anywhere they could. Normally it was a percentage of what they were unloading. In my case, it was my drink. It was stupid of me to leave my pint unattended. They left sharpish. I looked around the room. If anyone had witnessed the altercation, they were doing a very good impression of carrying on as if nothing had happened. They were used to looking the other way, especially when unloading or receiving stolen goods. Obviously, the smugglers shrugged and kept themselves to themselves. I was down to my last tenner, enough for a pint. There was no way I would visit the cash machine at dark around this place. I would get some more money out in daylight hours. It was a company cash card. All the expenditure would have to be accounted for, and all the drinks would be docked from my wages at the end of the week. My boss was tough. No one within a 70-mile radius accepted anything except for cash. I could use the card to get money out of the hole in the wall at exorbitant rates. I could not use contactless anywhere outside the main cities. Smugglers only ever took cash. Striding up to the bar, I waited my turn. 1 barman and 3 customers. You never had to wait long. People nurse their pint these days, along with a lot of other things. Another pint of Bishop's Toe, please. Someone snaffled my pint, I complained, hoping he would have replaced my pint for free. If I was looking for sympathy, the barman's raised eyebrows did not instill me with confidence. Hardly surprising, is it? You are in the biggest smuggling harbour in the world, I should think, Einstein. How did you know my name? Is that really your name? No. Just kidding. I'm new in town. I heard Poseidon Bay was a tough place, but I thought my pint would be safe. The barman looked at me as if I were mad. I stood my ground. I was not going to leave without getting another pint, even if I had to pay for it. No chance. If you've got a complaint, then have a word with the manager. Here he comes, the barman assured me. You are over 25, aren't you? Of course, I lied. Good, he said, obviously not believing me. The irony in his voice rang out like a monastery bell. We both knew half the people in the place were underage. He set the three-quarter filled glass on the counter and pretended that the froth on top that brought the level to the brim was part of the drink. I stared at him, willing him to top up my drink. We both knew it was a short measure. He stared back at me, willing for me to pay up. I caved. How much is that? I asked. £9.95, please. Thanks. I knew in Poseidon Bay arguing was useless, and I was not going to ask for change. He knew it, everyone knew it. 5-pence coins had gone out of circulation 6 years after Brexit. That was why they set their price like that. Look after the pennies? No one would argue over 5 pence. I was not going to be the first. Besides, I had spotted the manager wending his way towards me. He slipped past the barman and opened the flap on the bar, walking through the gate, bolting it behind him, and deftly putting the flap back. He turned to face the throng standing in front of him, waiting to be served. No one was there. It was my chance. Excuse me, landlord, but my pint was just stolen, I exclaimed angrily. My acting abilities were second to none. I had played Puck like a professional actor. Well, that was what Miss Swaits, my drama teacher, said after my role in the school production. Happens all the time here. We sell beer. We don't provide security for it, he noted as he lifted the bar counter flap, stepped through the wooden gate and closed the bar flap behind him. The police won't come here after one of their squad cars was pushed into the harbour. Those electric cars don't like water. It was a shocking waste of life. He walked towards me. He did not look aggressive, but 4 years of being in sales had taught me to expect the unexpected. I put my pint on the cigarette machine in order to talk to him, without a pint as a prop. Even though he was moving through the bar, I was determined to stick with him. I was his shadow. I followed him that closely, talking at his shoulder. I appreciate that, but what exactly are you doing to keep everyone safe here? I asked indignantly. He would no doubt buy me a replacement pint just to get me off his back and out of his hair. Come with me and I'll show you, he replied tersely, surprising me by his reply and by the fact that as he spoke he was rolling his shirt sleeves up like a street fighter. I briefly wondered if there was going to be any violence. I even thought he might take a pop at me. I could see us sparring in the beer garden. I turned round to grab my pint and follow. It was already gone. Yet there was no one there. This place had originally been a 15th century inn. I would have believed there was a dipsomaniac ghost haunting the place, if anyone had told me. Hurriedly, following the landlord, I caught up with him at a large rectangular table with bentwood chairs on either side. I noticed a pile of cans and glasses piled up in front of two lovely-looking local girls. So there were some good-looking girls here. They were nursing their beer, seemingly oblivious to the mess. Next to them were 6 smugglers, you could tell. They had their white suit jackets on the back of their chairs. Britannia blue shirts undone so much that wisps of chest hair peeped out from the open neck. Royal red braces, and Union Jack cufflinks. Right, boys, the landlord announced with a friendly manner. He was obviously used to dealing with characters. We can't allow cans brought in, and the glasses you've piled up in front of the ladies need to be put back on your side or taken to the bar. His instructions were met with incredulity. On the far end was a fresh-faced, freckly teenager who seemed to be the ringleader. He swung back and forth on his chair defiantly. The landlord promptly produced a Phase 3 taser gun from his pocket and hit the closest of the white suits with a jolt of 500 volts of electricity. It was like he had 17 piranha fish swimming in his white suit trousers. The poor boy went into spasm for 30 seconds, screamed in agony, and collapsed back in his chair unconscious. There was a flurry of activity while the other four cleared away, taking the detritus up to the bar. The ringleader swung on his chair. It was my chance to make a name for myself. The landlord had shock value. I just had to be brave. A tough reputation as a salesman is always needed these days. Yeah, those cans need to be recycled, and you shouldn't be swinging on your chair, I thundered like Thor with a headache. As I passed the corner of the table, I pushed the ringleader's shoulder, forcing all four legs on the floor. He looked up into my eyes, a sneer on his face and a death stare. His lips twitched as though he were going to speak. I noticed that he was a typical leader, good-looking, tall and charismatic, everything I was not. I was taking on Alexander the Great, only in my rush to make my name well known, I had neglected to notice exactly to whom I was talking and whom exactly I was taking on. I am fairly tall, fairly good-looking, and fairly good fun to be with. He was the Adonis above all others, the epitome of all three. The presence of the landlord saved my life. His electric pacifier may have been the main reason why he did not rip my head from my body. Perhaps he was polite and kind to strangers, or he was biding his time because he felt revenge was a dish best enjoyed cold, or maybe he was waiting for there to be less witnesses around. Now, lads, you leave those girls alone. If you want to avoid a bolt from heaven, the landlord warned them, shaking his taser in the air like Zeus, holding a thunderbolt above his head and deciding his target. The other smugglers meekly sat down, having cleared away, ignoring their unconscious colleague. He was still out cold. His eyes were still closed. His chin still rested on his chest, and his body still slumped forward in his chair. The girls were talking animatedly now, pretending nothing was going on. That was the way in Poseidon Bay. Yeah, I growled. My name is Aubrey East. I'll be in town for a while, so I'll get to know you all sooner or later. I surveyed their faces, looking to see if I had impressed anyone. I got another deadly look from the ringleader, and that was all. I think one of the girls secretly glanced over at me, sighing with admiration, but she could have been rolling her eyes and groaning. It was difficult to tell. It was time to leave. I was not sure how much change was left in the landlord's electric. I was not sure how much charge even was left in the landlord's electric cattle prod. I walked out onto the fire escape, my leather shoes tapping out a tune on the metal grid beneath my feet. I trotted noisily down the steps and into the beer garden. To the left I spotted a lane. As the 6 smugglers were coming after me, they must have completed ninja training. I could not hear footsteps on steel. I was assured by the silence behind me, but the walk to my hotel was going to be dangerous. I dared not look back. Far ahead in the lane, within calling distance, was a group of rugby players coming for an evening pint, still dressed in their sports clothes. I had noticed another team sitting in the beer garden in rugby shirts, shorts and socks, their filthy boots piled up at the end of the benches. If I was attacked from behind, it was likely both teams would save me. I was confident of that. I felt sure that a single person attacked by half a dozen wimpy-looking teenagers would be rescued. Rugby players are tough and hate injustice. I know that much. Luck was finally on my side, but I was thirsty still. I had walked for 3 days to get to Poseidon Bay and had only wet my whistle on a sip of beer. I would have to buy a litre carton of water at the hotel. There was nothing for it. Maybe I would eat out tomorrow night if I could pull off the deal. My boss would not begrudge me a decent meal if I made him some money. That seemed reasonable. Good. So there I was, all alone. Tonight, all I had to look forward to was half a tin of pilchards and a hunk of baguette. Tomorrow would be my second day in Poseidon Bay. I had finally made it to the most famous den of iniquity on earth. I wondered what this place would have been like before Article 50 was triggered and the smugglers moved in. My boss had helpfully advised me to read Moonfleet. The book was set around here in the 18th century when smuggling was civilised. I wondered if I would be able to see the latest wreck, the Czech freighter, run aground when the privateers turned off the lighthouses and blocked the GPS signals along the coast. It had floundered on Seaton Beach, only 10 miles away. I might get a lift there after a good night's sleep and a hard day negotiating. There was a good pub, according to my boss, and I might pick up some bunts on the shore. If not, it was a hot day forecast. I might go for a quick dip or a little paddle. With the thoughts of swimming in my mind, I suddenly realised I was at the hotel reception and I was in one piece and I had no trunks with me, so no swimming for me. In my room, I laid out a blue, red and white silk tie, my navy suit and a white shirt on the computer desk next to the bed. I slipped a pair of highly polished brogues under the desk. I stripped off my white shirt and slid my trousers over my legs. There was an alcove with a curtain behind, which I had stowed my rolled top rucksack in, and a linen bag. I gathered up my clothes, slipped out of my socks, and popped all my dirty clothes in the linen sack. I have to be highly organised, literally living out of a suitcase and visiting people around the country. Wrapping a trowel around my waist, I walked into the shower next door. Travelling around the country necessitates minimising everything. A small sponge bag contained a 100ml plastic bottle of shampoo, a 100ml plastic bottle of shower gel, 100ml tube of toothpaste, a 150ml roll of deodorant stick, and my electric toothbrush. I bought my own tiny towel, but the hotel had provided me with one that was the size up. Not quite the size of a swimming towel, but close. The shower made me feel better. The water was hot. They must have had solar panels on the roof. And, at least, I was clean. Drying my hair afterwards, I thought about the meeting with Lawless tomorrow. I knew he was interested, otherwise why would he see me? All I had to do was negotiate a good price if I wanted to keep my job. I could not blow the negotiations, no matter what happened. I had to seal the deal. If I failed, my boss would sack me immediately. I wrapped myself in a fresh towel, my own, and drew back the alcove curtain again. Reaching up onto the single shelf above all my gear, I carefully took down a plastic sandwich box, being careful not to tilt it. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I opened it, relieved to see nothing had spilt from the tin. Pilchards in tomato sauce would not be on my list of final meals before execution, but I was hungry and feeling depressed. I eat when I feel down. Comfort food is my thing. The baguette was still dry. No sauce had sloshed out onto the bread, which was a result. Even the stale chewy baguette provided some comfort. I went to bed on a full stomach, which put me in the top 10% of the population, which made me feel somehow ashamed and better, both at the same time. Tomorrow morning, the rest of my baguette would be hard, just like my day. And that is the end of chapter 1.